Aloha everybody! Welcome to this episode of Forward with Forli. Today we're going to be talking about whether to take your guide dog with you to the Hawaiian Islands. I got back from a trip recently to Maui. It was fantastic. Rocking a great tan. Oh yeah. And I thought I would share my perspective with you on whether or not you should take your dog with you to Hawaii. Now, this is not a video that's going to teach you how to get your dog to Hawaii. I'm going to refer you to the Hawaii State Department of Agriculture website. I will link it in the description below. They have a guide and service dog page that specifically talks about how to get your dog to and from the Hawaiian Islands. There's some pretty specific stuff, so I will let them talk about that. This video is going to talk about before that, whether you should or should not bring your dog with you to Hawaii, whether you're going on a cruise ship or hanging out on one of the islands, visiting family, business, etc. So to get started, we'll go ahead and start with the regulations and time. So if you're going to take your dog to any of the Hawaiian Islands, you have to go through some very specific steps, and there's a very specific procedure that's established by the Hawaii State Department of Agriculture. And you're probably wondering, why is this a big deal? Well, Hawaii is a chain of islands 2,500 miles in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and they do not want rabies, and I can't say I blame them. So they're very particular about what comes to their island as well as what leaves their island. So it's definitely something that you're going to have to follow very carefully. There's a titer test involved, there's health certificates, and several other steps that you need to follow. So you need to think about, do you have the time necessary to take this on, to make sure that you have the appropriate paperwork. Here's the deal. If you don't have everything in order, you can get to Hawaii, but either A, your dog's going to be left in quarantine, or B, you and your dog are going right back to the mainland. Either way, it's going to mess up your vacation or your trip to Hawaii, so I definitely recommend you consider the amount of time as well as the cost. Like I said, there's a titer test, that could be kind of expensive, there's health certificates, vet visits, that sort of thing. So you want to build in the appropriate cost to your travel budget if you're going to do this. The next thing we're going to talk about is environment. Okay, and this has several parts. As you probably know, the Hawaiian Islands are in a tropical region, and so that poses some interesting challenges for your dog. Let's say you're going in February, which is when this video was filmed. Where I live, it's freezing, it's cold, it's wet, it's raining, it's dark, right? Your dog doesn't know they're going to Hawaii. They've grown a thick double coat, and now they're getting on a plane, and 6 hours later, they're bam in tropical paradise. And so they may not do well with that transition. So think about your dog's reaction to heat. How well do they do in the heat? Do you think they will enjoy making that relatively drastic transition? Now, if you're going in like August and you live in a place where it's hot, it actually might be cooler in Hawaii than maybe where you're currently living. If you're like in Arizona or Nevada or something, it's like over 100 degrees. You might go to one of the islands and it might be 85 degrees. So that wouldn't be as big of an issue depending on the time of year. Also know the sun is more intense in that part of the world, so and dogs can sunburn, so be aware of that. If you're there with your dog, keep an eye on them, be aware that the sun is more powerful. The next thing I'm going to talk about with environment is the presence of loose dogs. Now, I went to the island of Maui and I stayed on the west side near the town of Lahaina. Great place to go, and what I observed was quite a few loose dogs about, especially in public spaces like the beach park, and other sort of communal spaces. And this sort of seems to be like a cultural thing, at least on this part of Maui. So something you want to keep in mind. Do you want to be focused on whether there are loose dogs about and whether you want to contend with that. Are you okay with the fact that there are loose dogs around? Definitely keep that in mind. The next thing is traffic. Maui is growing. It's a very big touristy area, and so there is a lot of traffic. Now, if you go to, say, like Molokai, where the tourism is much smaller, you're probably not going to have this problem. But if you go to any of the major tourist spots in the Hawaiian Islands, you're definitely going to want to contend, you're definitely going to contend with traffic. So what I mean by that is it's pretty aggressive. You've got a lot of tourists who don't know where they're going. They're looking around. It's beautiful. You've got the locals just trying to get somewhere. Maybe they know some shortcuts. And it creates for a pretty chaotic environment. So expect that you're going to have some traffic checks. So be prepared for that. Do you want to deal with that? You know, the traffic is crazy. I even saw somebody pulling out of a driveway one morning and they hit somebody's pet dog just because they weren't paying attention. So, you know, that's something that's pretty serious. I mean, it was an accident, it does happen, but my point is you really want to be aware of the traffic and realize that it's going to be aggressive. Going along with that, the pedestrian traffic is going to be more than maybe what you're used to on an average city sidewalk, especially in places like Lahaina, which is an artsy, super cool, coastal, touristy type place. You're going to have people milling about, and the sidewalks there are pretty narrow. I'll get to that in a minute. But certainly, you know, is your dog willing to put up with navigating through crowds? Now, I mentioned sidewalks are narrow. Definitely the case on the part of Maui that I stayed at. It's an island. It's a finite space. So things like sidewalks are not going to be the most wide and accommodating. They're there. You're also going to want to be aware that there are quite a few sidewalkless areas as well. Probably has to do again with the space and land. So be aware of that walking with your dog. You're going to be on some narrow sidewalks. You're going to have pedestrians. You may have sidewalkless. All of this stuff might be different than what you're used to on the mainland, depending on where you live. So the last thing on my list of things to consider is to think about the type of activities that you plan to do while you're in Hawaii, and then think about them from the perspective of a guide dog handler and the need for a guide dog. How often do you think you're going to be working your guide dog, and is that amount of time worth the amount of time, expense, and other factors that I discussed in this video, as well as things that you might come up with in your own research. So look at that, see if it's worth it. I am neither advocating for or against taking a guide dog to Hawaii. I know people that have and have really enjoyed their time with their dogs. I know people who haven't and have had just a great time as well. So it's really up to you. It's personal preference. But you certainly want to think about what you're going to be doing and how that will impact the care of your guide dog. And you might determine that it's harder to leave your dog with somebody or at a kennel or whatever you choose to do, and that it's worth taking a dog with you to Hawaii. So definitely think about that, what you're going to be doing from a perspective of a guide dog handler and the sort of the point of view of the dog, if you will. Personally, I chose to leave my dog for this particular trip. I hope to take my dog with me at some point in the future. I definitely will be back to Hawaii. It's an amazing place, worth every penny. I highly recommend you go, but I just couldn't make it work this time. And it was fine. It was a little disruptive not having a dog, right? Because, you know, that anytime you make a transition from one mobility tool to the other, there's got to be a little bit of a disruption. But it was doable, it was workable, and it's always good practice to pull that cane out every now and again and use it, even when you have a guide dog and things are going well, just in case of things like this, or you know, or if your dog gets sick or something like that. But yeah, so I didn't take my dog with me. it worked out just fine. She had a great place to stay. And so these are my tips and suggestions for considering taking a guide dog with you to Hawaii. I hope they're helpful to you. If you like this video, feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and aloha!